Welcome to the Saving History podcast, the sanctuary for castle devotees and medieval history enthusiasts. Prepare to embark on a thrilling voyage through time as we unveil enthralling history and legend. From ancient folklore to cutting-edge restoration, we've got it all covered. So grab your headphones and let's dive right in.
France in the early 17th century was a nation simmering with unrest and intrigue. The air was thick with the scent of ambition and the whispers of conspiracy. Against this backdrop, a man of immense intellect and iron emerged, steering the ship of state through turbulent waters. Cardinal Richelieu. This episode delves into the seeds of dissent that took root under his rule, setting the stage for one of the most dramatic power struggles in French history, the Cinq-Mars conspiracy. Cardinal Richelieu, born Armand Jean du Plessis, ascended to power as the chief minister to King Louis XIII in 1624. Richelieu was not just a clergyman, but a master strategist with a vision for a centralized French state, free from the divisive power of the nobility and the influence of foreign enemies. His policies were radical and often ruthless, aimed at consolidating the power of the monarchy and reducing the traditional privileges of the nobility. Richelieu's rise to power was as much a testament to his political acumen as it was to his ability to navigate the treacherous waters of the French court. As he amassed power, he implemented sweeping reforms that altered the very fabric of French society. His military campaigns were designed to strengthen France's position in Europe, while his domestic policies sought to curb the power of the nobility and bring the rebellious provinces under royal control. However, these very reforms sowed the seeds of dissent among the French aristocracy. The nobility, who had long enjoyed a degree of autonomy and influence, found their powers curtailed and their privileges threatened. The once mighty lords were now subject to the will of a single man, a cardinal whose ambitions seemed to know no bounds. This growing discontent among the nobles set the stage for a series of conspiracies and rebellions aimed at undermining Richelieu's authority. Among the discontented was a young and ambitious nobleman named Henri Coiffier de Ruzé, Marquis de Cinq-Mars, born in 1620. Cinq-Mars was the son of a distinguished family with a long history of service to the crown. His father, Antoine Coiffier, had been a trusted counsellor to King Louis XIII. From an early age, Cinq-Mars exhibited a keen intellect and a flair for courtly manners, traits that would serve him well in the years to come. In the halls of power, Cinq-Mars quickly distinguished himself with his charm and wit. His striking appearance and engaging personality made him a favourite among the courtiers, and he soon caught the eye of King Louis XIII himself. The king, who was often lonely and in need of companionship, found in Cinq-Mars a kindred spirit. Their bond grew stronger, and Cinq-Mars became the king's favourite, a position that granted him considerable influence. As his star rose, so too did his ambitions. He began to see himself not just as a courtier, but as a potential player in the grand game of politics. His close relationship with the king gave him access to the inner workings of the court, and he quickly realized the extent of Richelieu's power. It was a power that both fascinated and repelled him. Richelieu, ever the shrewd politician, was not blind to the growing influence of Cinq-Mars. Initially, he tolerated the young nobleman, seeing him as a useful tool to control the king's affections and to keep the court in line. However, Richelieu's tolerance had its limits. As Cinq-Mars' grew influence and ambitions became more apparent, Richelieu began to view him as a potential threat. The cardinal's piercing eyes, ever watchful, missed little of the burgeoning favouritism and the whisperings of dissent among the nobles. Cinq-Mars, emboldened by his proximity to the king, started to harbour dreams of overthrowing Richelieu. He was not alone in his dissatisfaction. The French nobility, feeling the weight of Richelieu's reforms, were eager to find a champion who could restore their lost privileges and curtail the cardinal's iron grip on power. The stage was set for a confrontation that would pit ambition against strategy, youth against experience, and personal loyalty against political necessity. As tensions simmered, Richelieu's policies continued to alienate the nobility. His centralized approach undermined the feudal system that had long granted regional powers to noble families. The establishment of the intendant system, where royal officials were appointed to oversee provincial governance, directly challenged the traditional roles of the nobles. Furthermore, Richelieu's harsh measures against those who defied royal authority, such as the brutal suppression of the Huguenot rebellions, sent a clear message of his uncompromising stance. Within this climate of discontent, Gaston, Duke of Orleans, the king's brother, emerged as a key figure. Gaston had a history of rebellion and intrigue, often finding himself at odds with his brother and Richelieu. His own ambitions and grievances made him a natural ally for Cinq-Mars. The two, along with other dissatisfied nobles, began to weave a web of conspiracy aimed at dethroning Richelieu. The conspirators held secret meetings, their discussions shrouded in the dim candlelight of grand chateaux and the hushed corners of Parisian salons. They sought support not only from within France, but also from foreign powers like Spain, who were eager to see Richelieu's downfall. Promises were made, alliances forged in the shadows, and plans laid with a mix of desperation and determination. Cinq-Mars, with his charm and audacity, became the face of this rebellion. He approached these clandestine activities with the same fervour that had won him the king's favour, believing that his cause was just and that his victory was inevitable. However, he underestimated the reach and cunning of his adversary. Richelieu's network of spies and informants was vast, penetrating even the most secretive circles. The cardinal, ever vigilant, soon caught wind of the brewing conspiracy. He watched and waited, allowing the conspirators to believe they were safe, biding his time until he could strike with decisive force. The king, meanwhile, found himself in a precarious position. His affection for Cinq-Mars was genuine, but his reliance on Richelieu was absolute. Louis XIII was a monarch torn between personal loyalty and the harsh realities of governance. He appreciated Cinq-Mars's companionship and valued his counsel, but he knew that without Richelieu his reign could crumble under the weight of internal strife and external threats. This internal conflict within the king mirrored the larger battle for power that was unfolding. The seeds of dissent had been sown deep, and the plot against Richelieu began to take on a life of its own. As the conspirators grew bolder, Richelieu tightened his grip, preparing for the moment when he would reveal his hand. The tension reached a fever pitch as the conspirators moved closer to executing their plans. The summer of 1642 was a time of intense manoeuvring and mounting suspicion. The fate of France seemed to hang in the balance, with the future of the nation caught between the ambitions of a young nobleman and the strategic genius of a seasoned statesman. In the grand tapestry of French history, the Cinq-Mars conspiracy stands out as a testament to the volatile mix of personal ambition and political power. It is a story of intrigue, betrayal, and the relentless pursuit of control set against the backdrop of a nation in flux. As the seeds of dissent grew into a full-blown conspiracy, the stage was set for a dramatic showdown that would shape the course of French history. The corridors of power in 17th-century France were no place for the faint-hearted. Intrigue and ambition thrived in the shadowy recesses of the royal court, and few embodied these traits more than Henri Coiffier de Ruzé, Marquis de Cinq-Mars. His journey from a promising young nobleman to a key figure in a daring conspiracy is a tale of charm, ambition, and ultimately tragedy. Henri Coiffier de Ruzé was born in 1620 into a distinguished family with a rich history of service to the French crown. His father had served as a counsellor to King Louis XIII, instilling in his son a deep sense of loyalty to the monarchy. From an early age, Henri exhibited an intellect and poise that marked him as a rising star among the young nobility. His education was rigorous, emphasizing not only the traditional subjects of literature and philosophy, but also the arts of diplomacy and warfare. In 1638, a young and vibrant Cinq-Mars entered the royal court. His arrival did not go unnoticed. With his striking looks, magnetic charm, and keen intellect, he quickly became a favorite among the courtiers. His presence was refreshing in a court, often dominated by older, more jaded personalities. It wasn't long before his charisma caught the attention of the most important figure in the realm, King Louis XIII. The king, often described as melancholic and reserved, found in Cinq-Mars a kindred spirit who brought a rare sense of joy and companionship to his life. Louis XIII, burdened by the pressures of kingship and his complex relationship with Cardinal Richelieu, saw in the young nobleman a refreshing contrast to the grim realities of his daily existence. Cinq-Mars's wit and charm provided a welcome distraction, and their bond grew stronger with each passing day. As their relationship deepened, his influence at court began to grow. He was not merely a favorite. He became an adviser, confidant, and, in many ways, a surrogate son to the king. This newfound influence did not go unnoticed by the rest of the court or by Cardinal Richelieu. Initially, he viewed Cinq-Mars as a useful tool to maintain control over the king's personal life. However, as his ambitions became more apparent, the cardinal's tolerance began to wane. Cinq-Mars was acutely aware of the power dynamics at play. His close relationship with the king provided him with a unique vantage point, allowing him to observe the intricate dance of politics and power that defined the French court. He quickly realized that his proximity to the king was not just a privilege, but a potential path to greater influence. His ambition grew, fueled by the adulation of his peers and his own burgeoning sense of destiny. It was around this time that he began to distance himself from merely being a favoured courtier. He sought to position himself as a significant player in the realm's political machinations. His natural charisma and intelligence made him adept at navigating the treacherous waters of court politics. He forged alliances with other discontented nobles and sought to leverage his relationship with the king to challenge Richelieu's dominance. One of the most pivotal figures in this unfolding drama was Gaston, Duke of Orleans, the king's brother. Gaston had a long history of opposition to Richelieu and harboured his own ambitions for power. His previous attempts at rebellion had failed, but he remained a potent symbol of noble resistance against the centralizing policies of the cardinal. Cinq-Mars saw in Gaston a valuable ally and a kindred spirit. Their partnership was born out of mutual ambition and a shared desire to curb Richelieu's influence. The young Marquis and the experienced Duke began to hold secret meetings, plotting to undermine the cardinal's authority. These clandestine gatherings were filled with heated discussions and bold plans, as they sought to rally other dissatisfied nobles to their cause. His charm and persuasive skills were instrumental in recruiting supporters, who saw in him a beacon of hope against Richelieu's oppressive rule. As Cinq-Mars' political activities intensified, so did his efforts to secure the king's favour. He used his intimate relationship with Louis XIII to subtly influence royal decisions and gather support for his cause. The king, caught between his loyalty to Richelieu and his affection for Cinq-Mars, found himself in a difficult position. He valued Richelieu's counsel and recognized his importance in maintaining the stability of the realm, but he was also swayed by the charm and fervour of his young favourite. His ambitions were not confined to the French court alone. He sought to forge alliances with foreign powers, promising them support in exchange for backing his bid to overthrow Richelieu. His most notable foreign ally was Spain, which saw an opportunity to weaken France by supporting internal dissent. These secret negotiations added a layer of complexity to the conspiracy as he balanced domestic intrigue with international diplomacy. Despite his growing influence and ambitious plans, he was not without his flaws. His youth and inexperience often led him to underestimate the formidable intellect and reach of Cardinal Richelieu. The cardinal, ever vigilant, kept a close eye on the young nobleman, recognizing the threat he posed. Richelieu's network of spies and informants was extensive, and he was well aware of the whispers of dissent circulating in the court. In 1641, Richelieu decided to test Cinq-Mars' loyalty. He appointed him as Grand Equerry, a prestigious position that placed him in charge of the royal stables and gave him direct access to the king. This appointment was a double-edged sword. While it increased his influence, it also placed him under closer scrutiny. Richelieu hoped that the increased responsibility would either curb the young nobleman's ambitions or expose his true intentions. Cinq-Mars, undeterred, continued to plot and scheme. His boldness knew no bounds, and he began to push the limits of his influence. His attempts to manipulate the king grew more audacious, and his disdain for Richelieu more apparent. The cardinal, however, remained a step ahead, watching and waiting for the right moment to act. The tension between Cinq-Mars and Richelieu reached a boiling point as the conspiracy took shape. The young Marquis, driven by a mix of personal ambition and genuine belief in his cause, pressed forward with his plans. His charm and charisma had won him many allies, but they also made him a prime target for Richelieu's wrath. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, with the fate of France hanging in the balance. The court of King Louis XIII, under the shadow of Cardinal Richelieu's unyielding gaze, was a hotbed of tension and mistrust. Against this backdrop, Henri Coiffier de Ruzé, Marquis de Cinq-Mars, began to sow the seeds of a conspiracy that would shake the very foundations of the French state. The allure of power, the bitterness of discontent, and the complexity of human ambition intertwined to set the stage for a dramatic clash. By the early 1640s, he had firmly established himself as the king's favourite. His charm and intellect had won him a place of prominence at court, but his growing ambition made him restless. He had seen firsthand the extent of Richelieu's power and control over the king and the realm, and he began to envision a France free from the cardinal's iron grip. His early ambitions, once limited to gaining the king's favour, now expanded to a grander vision of political upheaval. The dissatisfaction among the French nobility was palpable. Richelieu's centralizing policies had stripped them of their traditional powers and privileges. The cardinal's reforms, while strengthening the state, had marginalized the nobles, reducing their influence and autonomy. These nobles, once powerful lords in their own right, now found themselves at the mercy of a single man's will. This brewing discontent provided fertile ground for Cinq-Mars' ambition. His charm and persuasive skills were crucial in rallying support for the conspiracy. He painted a picture of a France where the nobility could regain their lost power, and where the oppressive hand of Richelieu would be lifted. His passion and conviction inspired those around him, and his vision of a new political order resonated with the discontented lords. Among his most fervent supporters was the Duke of Bouillon, a powerful noble with significant military influence. As the conspiracy took shape, the conspirators realized that they would need more than just domestic support to succeed. They sought alliances with foreign powers who had their own interests in weakening Richelieu's France. Spain, France's perennial rival, became a key player in the conspiracy. The Spanish, eager to destabilize their northern neighbor, promised support in exchange for concessions once Richelieu was overthrown. This alliance added a layer of complexity to the conspiracy, as Cinq-Mars and his allies balanced their domestic plans with international diplomacy. In 1641, Cinq-Mars and Gaston formalized their alliance with Spain through a secret treaty. The treaty promised Spanish military support in exchange for territorial concessions and favorable terms once Richelieu was deposed. This bold move underscored the seriousness of the conspiracy and the lengths to which the conspirators were willing to go. It also highlighted the desperation of their situation. They were ready to enlist the help of a foreign power to achieve their goals. Richelieu, ever vigilant, was not unaware of the growing discontent. His network of spies and informants was vast, penetrating even the most secretive circles of the nobility. The cardinal watched with a mixture of suspicion and calculated patience as the seeds of conspiracy began to take root. He knew that a premature crackdown could drive the conspirators deeper underground, making them harder to root out. Instead, he chose to bide his time, allowing the conspiracy to grow until he could strike decisively. Emboldened by his alliances and the growing support among the nobility, began to take more risks. His actions became bolder, his rhetoric more defiant. He started to openly criticize Richelieu, questioning his policies and his right to wield such power. This public dissent did not go unnoticed. Richelieu, aware of the young nobleman's ambitions, tightened his grip on the reins of power, preparing for the inevitable clash. The tension between Cinq-Mars and Richelieu reached a boiling point in the summer of 1642. The conspirators, feeling that their moment was at hand, began to finalize their plan. They aimed to strike when Richelieu was most vulnerable, hoping to rally the king to their side and force the cardinal's removal. The stakes were high and the risk of failure loomed large. For Cinq-Mars, the path to power was fraught with danger, but the allure of victory was too great to resist. As the conspiracy edged closer to fruition, the atmosphere at court grew increasingly tense. The king, caught between his loyalty to Richelieu and his affection for Cinq-Mars, found himself in a precarious position. Louis XIII, aware of the mounting discontent but reliant on Richelieu's guidance, struggled to balance the competing forces within his realm. The seeds of conspiracy, once sown, had grown into a tangled web of ambition and intrigue, with the fate of France hanging in the balance. The stage was set for a dramatic confrontation, a clash between the old order and the new, between ambition and authority. The seeds of conspiracy, nurtured in the shadows and fed by the discontent of the nobility, were about to bear fruit. The outcome would not only determine the fate of Cinq-Mars and his allies, but also shape the future of the French state. The echoes of their actions would reverberate through history, a testament to the volatile mix of power, ambition, and human frailty. The ambitious Cinq-Mars, now deeply entangled in his own plans, found himself at the center of a network of alliances, deceptions, and high-stakes gambits. The cardinal, ever the strategist, recognized the young nobleman's ambition and the threat it posed. However, Richelieu also saw an opportunity. By allowing Cinq-Mars to believe he was unobserved, the cardinal could monitor the conspiracy as it unfolded, gathering intelligence and preparing for a decisive strike. Richelieu's network of spies was extensive, with agents placed in key positions throughout the kingdom, feeding him a steady stream of information. One of the most audacious moves in the conspiracy was his effort to secure military backing. He and his allies, including Gaston, Duke of Orleans, and the Duke of Bouillon, understood that their plans would require more than just noble support. They needed armed force. The conspirators began to secretly amass troops and weapons, using their influence to rally loyalists who were disillusioned with Richelieu's centralizing policies. The Duke of Bouillon, with his substantial military experience and connections, played a crucial role in this aspect of the conspiracy. He provided not only strategic advice, but also the promise of troops from his own territories. The clandestine preparations were fraught with danger, as any hint of their activities reaching Richelieu could spell disaster. The conspirators operated with a heightened sense of paranoia, knowing that discovery would mean certain death. As plans for the overthrow progressed, Cinq-Mars hoped to create a rift between the king and Richelieu, believing that if he could weaken the cardinal's influence over Louis, the path to power would be clearer. Richelieu's response to Cinq-Mars' machinations was measured and calculating. Rather than confront the young nobleman directly, he continued to gather evidence and bide his time. The cardinal knew that a premature move could alert the conspirators and drive them into deeper secrecy. Instead, he watched and waited, allowing the web of intrigue to grow more complex, confident that his eventual strike would be devastatingly effective. As the summer of 1642 approached, the conspirators felt that their moment was near. The tension at court was palpable, with factions aligning themselves for the impending clash. Cinq-Mars, buoyed by the support of his allies and the promise of Spanish aid, pushed forward with his plans. His actions became more daring, his rhetoric more inflammatory. He began to openly challenge Richelieu's policies, hoping to rally the king and other nobles to his cause. Despite his outward confidence, he was not blind to the dangers he faced. He knew that Richelieu's spies were everywhere, and the risk of betrayal was ever present. The young Marquis navigated this treacherous landscape with a mixture of boldness and caution, constantly aware that one misstep could lead to his downfall. Richelieu, for his part, continued to play a masterful game of patience and deception. He allowed the conspirators to believe they were making progress, even as he tightened his grip on the reins of power. The cardinal's ability to maintain control while appearing to give ground was a testament to his political genius. He understood that the key to defeating the conspiracy lay in timing. Striking too early could scatter the conspirators, but waiting too long could give them the upper hand. The conspirators, believing they were on the verge of success, moved to execute their plans. As the final preparations were made, the conspirators could feel the weight of history pressing down upon them. The stakes were immense, and the consequences of failure too dire to contemplate. For Cinq-Mars, the journey from favoured courtier to chief conspirator had been one of ambition and daring, but also of constant peril. The young nobleman stood on the brink of either greatness or ruin, with the future of France hanging in the balance. The stage was set for a confrontation that would reverberate through the annals of French history. The air was thick with the anticipation of looming conflict, as the conspirators, led by Henri Coiffier de Ruzé, Marquis de Cinq-Mars, believed their moment of triumph was at hand. But within the shadows of intrigue, Cardinal Richelieu watched with a patient, calculating gaze. The elaborate conspiracy, nurtured in the shadows, was about to come crashing down, revealing the stark realities of power and betrayal. Richelieu's network of spies had been meticulously gathering intelligence on the activities of Cinq-Mars and his allies. Richelieu's patience was about to pay off, as he had accumulated enough evidence to act decisively. He knew that the conspiracy had reached a critical point and the time had come to strike. Buoyed by the support of his allies and the secret treaty with Spain, he felt confident that success was within reach. He and Gaston, Duke of Orleans, had meticulously planned their moves, believing they could count on the king's support once Richelieu was removed. The Duke of Bouillon, a key ally, began to show signs of wavering. His commitment to the cause seemed to falter under the immense pressure, and doubts crept into his mind. Unbeknownst to Cinq-Mars, Bouillon had already been approached by Richelieu's agents, who played on his fears and ambitions. Richelieu's trap was set. He allowed the conspirators to believe they were on the brink of success, even as he prepared to deliver a crushing blow. The cardinal's spies had intercepted communications and gathered enough evidence to implicate Cinq-Mars and his co-conspirators in high treason. Richelieu's response would be swift and decisive, aimed at not only dismantling the conspiracy, but also sending a clear message to any others who might dare to challenge his authority. The confrontation came to a head in the royal court. Richelieu, armed with irrefutable evidence, presented his findings to King Louis XIII. The king, who had been torn between his loyalty to Richelieu and his affection for Cinq-Mars, was faced with an undeniable truth. Richelieu laid out the details of the conspiracy, including the secret treaty with Spain, which amounted to treason. The king, feeling both betrayed and cornered, had no choice but to act. On Richelieu's orders, Cinq-Mars and his fellow conspirators were arrested. The suddenness of their downfall stunned the court. Cinq-Mars, once the charming favourite of the king, now found himself shackled and facing the wrath of the very authority he had sought to undermine. The young Marquis's bravado crumbled as the reality of his situation set in. His dreams of power had turned into a nightmare of betrayal and imminent death. The trial of Cinq-Mars and his allies was a spectacle of swift justice. Richelieu, ever the master of public perception, ensured that the proceedings were both thorough and highly publicized. The charges of high treason were laid out in stark detail, leaving no doubt about the guilt of the accused. The secret treaty with Spain, once a bold maneuver, now served as the most damning piece of evidence against them. Cinq-Mars, facing the tribunal, maintained a facade of defiance, but beneath the surface fear and regret gnawed at him. He realized too late the full extent of Richelieu's power and the futility of his own ambitions. The young nobleman's charisma and charm, which had once been his greatest assets, were now powerless against the relentless machinery of state justice. As the trial progressed, the full extent of the conspiracy was laid bare. Witnesses testified, documents were presented, and the tangled web of intrigue unravelled before the eyes of the court. The Duke of Bouillon, seeking to save his own skin, turned state's evidence, providing further details that sealed the fate of Cinq-Mars and the other conspirators. The betrayal was complete, and the conspirators were left with no defence. The verdict was inevitable. Cinq-Mars and his closest allies were found guilty of high treason and sentenced to death. The swift administration of justice was intended not only to punish, but to serve as a deterrent to others who might consider similar plots. The message was clear. Richelieu's power was absolute, and any challenge to his authority would be met with ruthless efficiency. On September 12, 1642, Cinq-Mars was led to the scaffold. The execution was a public event designed to demonstrate the might of the state and the consequences of rebellion. He faced his fate with a mixture of resignation and defiance. His handsome features, once the toast of the court, were now marked by the gravity of his impending death. As he stood before the gathered crowd, he attempted to maintain his dignity, knowing that his end would be a spectacle of both tragedy and justice. The executioner's blade fell, and with it the life of Henri Coiffier de Ruzé, Marquis de Cinq-Mars, came to a brutal end. The young nobleman's ambition, charm, and daring had led him to the heights of power and the depths of betrayal. His death marked the final act in a drama that had captivated the French court and demonstrated the unforgiving nature of political ambition. In the aftermath of the executions, Richelieu moved quickly to consolidate his power. The conspiracy had been crushed, and the cardinal's authority was unchallenged. The French nobility, cowed by the display of swift justice, retreated into compliance. Richelieu's vision of a centralized state, free from the meddling of rebellious nobles, moved closer to reality. The fall of Cinq-Mars served as a stark reminder of the perils of ambition and the ruthlessness of those who wield power. It was a lesson in the intricate dance of loyalty and betrayal, where the stakes were nothing less than life and death. The betrayal that unfolded in the summer of 1642 was not just the downfall of a young nobleman, but a defining moment in the history of France, a testament to the enduring struggle between authority and ambition. The young nobleman, whose ambition had soared to the highest echelons of power, now faced the grim consequences of his daring defiance against Cardinal Richelieu. His end was not just the story of an individual's downfall, but a poignant reflection on the merciless nature of political ambition and the brutal mechanisms of state power in 17th-century France. The legacy of Cinq-Mars' fall extended beyond his death. It reshaped the political landscape of France, reinforcing Richelieu's vision of a powerful centralized state. The nobility, chastened by the display of Richelieu's unyielding authority, found their traditional powers further eroded. The events of 1642 underscored the reality that in the game of power there could be no room for half measures. Richelieu's triumph was a testament to his strategic brilliance and his ability to outmaneuver even the most ambitious of his adversaries. For historians and observers of the period, the fall of Cinq-Mars is a vivid illustration of the complexities of political life in 17th-century France. It highlights the delicate balance between ambition and loyalty, the intricate web of alliances and betrayals, and the brutal realities of state power. The story of Cinq-Mars, with its dramatic twists and tragic conclusion, continues to captivate those who seek to understand the human dimensions of historical events. The legacy of Cinq-Mars, though marked by failure, serves as a reminder of the enduring nature of ambition and the relentless pursuit of power, themes that resonate through the annals of history. Thank you for joining us on this enchanting journey through medieval history. While our weekly episodes will continue to captivate your imagination, there's an exclusive treasure trove for subscribers, a secret vault of bonus episodes filled with extra tales and deep dives into the subjects we cover. Your curiosity fuels our mission, and we're truly thankful for your support. Until we meet again among stone walls and towering turrets, keep that torch of curiosity burning bright. Thank you for listening.